Hello and welcome to another great session with Michael Reed for Saptarishis Astrology. Today, hello Michael.
Hello, how's everybody doing?
Today we're going to talk about another Rashi called Gemini, and we are looking forward for a great session, Michael.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Let's hope we have a great session.
Yeah,
we've got lots of retrograde planets right now, so we're gonna cross our fingers and hope we have a great session, right? But that'll be good. We'll use that internal energy, because I want to dispel that myth that when planets start going retrograde, everything just gets disrupted, right?
Right.
We've got Mercury going down too. Another few days, yeah.
3 at present, 4 soon.
Yes, exactly. 4 soon, 4 planets soon. So it's time to slow down. It's time to reflect. So, Gemini. Well, if you remember, if you watched the first 2 videos on Aries and Taurus, we had Aries as being the primal spark, that first spark of creation, and we had Taurus as being the stabilizing force, or the womb, if you will, that gives birth to it. And with Gemini, we have a energy that is no longer just this androgynous thing. It's beginning to become differentiated. It's beginning to separate into the concepts of masculine and feminine, right? With Gemini comes Mahat. Just to explain that word, it's the great principle. Or probably the easiest translation into English would be the concept of intellect, right? Or cosmic intelligence. And from that cosmic intelligence comes the concept of manas, or the sensory mind. And from the concept of manas, there develops the concept of ego, which begins to understand, that this is what I am. Right? So differentiation begins to happen. All the polarities are there. And Gemini is a very polarized sign. Right?
So also the sense of I will start from there, correct?
Exactly. This is where the sense of I comes in, right? Yes. Sense of I, the self-consciousness. I think that's probably probably the best way to put it, is this concept of self-consciousness comes in here. Yes. And I don't want to give too many of our slides away, because I could find that I could get so into the terminology. So maybe it would be a good idea if we just went into the slides, because there's so much to explain there. And we'll talk about everything that the Rashi Gemini is about, and we have some example charts that we'll do at the end.
So let us start the presentation. And here we go. Yes.
There we go.
It is visible, yes?
It is. I can see it in this end. Excellent. So just like we did with all the other Rashis, we're going to talk about the limbs of time personified, or Kala Purusha. Right? So Gemini rules the arms, but probably he's saying as he goes like this, we shouldn't say just the arms, we should also say the hands, right? It's the hands too. So it's the arms and the hands that allow us to pick things up, to use the things that we're picking up, to build things, and to create things. And if we recognize for an individual to be here in consciousness, people often talk badly about the concept of ego. But while you're here in a consciousness, you need an ego. You need an ego to know that you're here as an individual. You need that ego in order to understand the particular path that you're on, or the journey that you're going through, so that you can get to that space of no ego. So on one level, you need that individuality. You need that experience just so you can go through it. Well, it's the same concept of the arms or the hands that's being used here. So we use our intellect to pick things up in our environment, to make connections between things, and to build things from all those things that we're experiencing. So the hands also give us the capacity to differentiate through our sense of touch. If we didn't have our eyes and we just, had to feel things around,
Feeling,
that would be
yes.
our sense of feeling.
Touching also, no?
Exactly. That's what I mean. Yes, exactly. The sense of touch. That's how we're able to tell the difference between things. And I notice a little typo through here, but that's okay though. So the hands give us the capacity to differentiate through our sense of touch, and we can just ignore the typo there. So Gemini is related to the skills and the tools that assist us and give us greater ability. And it gives us the capacity to differentiate through the mind. But equally, when we're doing medical astrology, Gemini would be associated with that body part, with the arms, with the hands. Some people have even given analogies in terms of the neck and the shoulders too, being connected with it, right? So it's that capacity to differentiate and to not just be a solid thing. There's movement with Gemini.
I think concerning the medical astrology, it is also, but probably later we will reach there, with the air or air affected things like asthma and breathing system. Well?
Exactly. It gets a little more complex with that, because what you'll find is you get into, with each of the planets, but we're talking about Rashis here, with each of the planets, you get into different bodily systems. Like Jupiter represents the endocrine system, right?
Yes.
And so you'll have particular Rashis within that system being associated with specific parts.
All right. When the planets come into the play.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So shall we go to the next slide?
Please. Yeah.
So dual, just like Aries was movable, and we had Taurus as being fixed or sthira, we've got Gemini as a dual Rashi, which the Sanskrit term for that is Dvishvabhava, meaning of two natures or two characters. And if we understand Gemini, it's both movable and fixed. At the same time, it has both of those potentials there. People often talk about the dual Rashis being associated with change or transition, but the concept is one of change within limits. So when you have those limits, you have that fixed concept too. So just as Gemini is a blend of the masculine and feminine, so there's change within limits, adjustments and improvements of what tend to happen within the dual Rashis. And what Gemini does in particular is it improves upon the available resources that we were talking about through Taurus. It takes those things, it does things, it makes adjustments to the things that come into its field of play, into its sphere of influence, so to speak, right?
Yes.
Great, yeah. But it could also be either or, either fixed or.
Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes a little bit of both. Sometimes Gemini will go between being fixed and then going, but I don't know if I should be fixed with this.
Very changeable, yes.
Exactly. So maybe I'll feel this spark, but no, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should go back to being fixed. And that's the dual Rashis in general, because what you've got happening is a transition that's taking place. And so with those transitions, nothing can be firm. Let's take the concept of somebody having a belief system. Let's say that, for instance, somebody's ninth lord is in Gemini, right? They may at one point have this very dogmatic belief system. Things are structured in this way. We were just talking about this before, things are structured in this particular manner. But then what happens is doubt. Doubt will seep in because the individual may find something that doesn't fit there. And so then that doubt comes in and they start examining their thoughts, their beliefs, and seeing if they really still continue to hold water or if they're valid. And so then when they begin to feel that they're not, well, they might begin to experiment with other things, but they're not really willing to let go of what they know completely. And that's how the dual Rashi function in general, right? So with Gemini, though, the key is, what do I have? What has come to me? And what can I do with it? Because we've got that concept of Mahat, or the cosmic principle, or cosmic intelligence. What do I have? What is this? Who am I? What can I do with who I am?
Exploring, sort of.
Yes.
Okay. So we continue with the next slide.
Yeah.
Is a male.
It's a male Rashi. As we were talking about with Aries when we did the video on Aries. So male Rashis are happiest taking action, whereas the female Rashis usually mark enjoying things, right? More passive, more receptive. So Gemini is happy when it's able to make use of the resources that it has, make use of its ideas, when it's focusing on the things that it's interested in. Right? As we'll see a little bit later on, because it can be so focused on its ideas or the things that it have or the things that have come to it, it really doesn't care about anything else. And we'll talk about this later, but I'm going to go ahead and jump forward to it. That's why people with planets in Gemini, let's say specifically the Atmakaraka, or even if they, have like their seventh lord in Gemini, these people will be considered to be fickle.
Fickle-minded.
Fickle-minded, and sometimes even selfish, because it's a male-oriented Rashi. So it's acting on what it has, and that's what it cares about.
All right.
Yeah.
Good point. Yes.
Interesting, yes.
So Krura. So we've got Krura Rashis and we've got Somya Rashis. Somya Rashis are the gentle Rashis. And I just want to clarify to people too, because sometimes we get these concepts, and this is specifically why it's good to use these translations of these terms, because people quite often use benefic or malefic. And I think that gets people thinking that something is wrong and something is right. So with Krura planets or Krura Rashis, it's not that it's wrong, it's just the way that those particular factors are focused. It's the way they're here to work.
Express.
Exactly.
Yes.
So with Krura Rashis, the focus is on just getting things done. And many times it's done without the consideration of what might happen as an effect. So it's just very firm in its approach of doing things. So Gemini, as we were just saying, so Gemini is really focused on its interests and using its resources, and they're not going to pay attention to other people or the things that are interfering with their processes or the things that they're interested in, or if those people don't want to assist in their journey. And so Gemini energy, people who have planets in Gemini, in relation to whatever that planet is about or whatever that house cusp is about, they can be accused of being two-faced about them. Because one moment they will seem one way. They will seem, very movable or wanting to make a change. And the next moment they'll seem very fixed, because that's the nature of the dual Rashis. And so they get misinterpreted as being fickle or two in association with those factors.
Yeah, it seems quite near this thought, no? But we can't look inside.
Right. Exactly.
Probably they fetch something out of this ocean of intellect and then they stick to it.
Exactly. That's why, Gemini energy can get very enthusiastic. It's very enthused. Do you know what I mean? It's really, I think the word is effusive, right? Very interested, very zealous, or very sparked about what they're into. And
curious.
They just get completely
very curious.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit later about a particular notable person in history who was like that. I'm not going to give it away yet, though.
Oh,
Great.
So the dosha. So Vata is the dosha of Gemini. The Vata dosha is related to air, which is the changeable element. So Vata of Gemini will use its skills and resources in order to direct change. And just to kind of voice to everybody out there, in terms of how you use each of these concepts, you can use it interpretatively. So you want to understand how Gemini, a planet in Gemini, is going to function. You can see that it's going to be changeable. But equally, this gets used in medical astrology.
The dosha particularly, yeah?
Exactly. Yeah. So this would get used in medical astrology. So it's really important to have a foundation in all the Rashis, really important to have a foundation in all the planets. And I think one of the worst things that people can do in astrology is think that the basics are beneath them.
Oh, no.
Because
Yes.
the basics are never beneath you.
No.
They are...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right.
I think we are probably speaking the same thing, yeah. So this is the base, and the base should always be strong, yeah. You can't build a house upon a weak base.
Exactly. And if you've been doing astrology for years, if you still go back and review the basics, you're going to find that your interpretative capacity and your predictive capacity just widens.
Absolutely.
Because you can never know everything about the Rashis, and you can never know everything about the planets, right? And the best astrologers are the ones who are just constant students all the time. They just want to learn everything, I would say the best astrologers are the ones who, after a while, they start feeling frustrated if they get really busy, because they don't have time to go study new techniques or anything like that.
Research.
Exactly.
Finding things, discovering new things, testing things.
That's what astrologers love. That's why we do what we do.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely true. So
air. So the air Rashis are more intellectually oriented. And they use their intellect to understand what they're experiencing and to develop explanations for things. And we were talking about Gemini being that first spark of the intellect. But intellect is a double-edged sword, right? Because we can have tons of intellectual capacity, but we can have no spiritual common sense.
True.
So we may reason our way out of an obvious solution. There was once a great philosopher who came up with the saying that reason is the disease of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Because awareness is what we need. It's not always intellect. We can use our intellect to give us awareness. Our mind's given to us so that we can have awareness. But the mind also has other facets to it, like intuition and the instinctual nature of the mind. And if the intellect is in complete control and kind of squashing those other factors that are there, that's when you begin to have those experiences where logic is actually getting in the way of progress, so to speak. So the intellect that's associated with Gemini is going to try to understand the concepts. Because if we understand that Gemini is taking the resources from Taurus, part of those resources are concepts.
Yes.
Those concepts that have been bestowed upon it. So when those concepts don't work, like we were just talking about, then doubts set in. And that's when adjustment begins to happen. And that's when you have that dualistic process begin to come into the equation that we were talking about. It's like, well, I've always thought or felt that this was the case, but now I'm not so sure. And so then the transformation begins to happen.
Or ultimately this will deepen the belief system, because only when the doubt sets in, it can be approved or disapproved. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm gonna give my astrology away. I have Jupiter in Gemini. So for me, and I'm always very careful to not transfer my belief onto other people. So I'll preface it with the concept that this can just be my belief, which is, if something comes along and it doesn't fit with your beliefs, right?
Yes.
But you see it as being valid, you see it as being true, then you explore it. If it shatters your beliefs and you adopt a new set of beliefs, then so much the better for it.
Definitely.
Because Dharma it's not something that's static. Always.
Sure.
Neither truth.
Exactly. Yes. That's a very big word, truth. And truth is such a big word.
It is.
Yes.
It's words in general. We're on the Gemini subject, so this all kind of fits. Words in general,
Intellectual,
right?
yes. I can feel it.
Words give us that capacity to differentiate between one thing and another. We can give it a description, but what is beyond that description? There's something that's beyond that description.
Beyond words.
Beyond words. And so words ultimately will only limit things. As will, on a certain level, beliefs can limit things, if not approached appropriately, right? If you begin to find something, well, here's the thought, because God is not just objective, God is subjective, So you have to have that experience of something.
Firsthand.
Yes. Of course.
Yeah. So it's the same with belief. You take it in. If there's an experience that fits with it for you, then that becomes a part of you. But when it's not, then there's a need for variance. And it's one of the processes of Gemini, is to take whatever is placed in it, and an adjustment is happening in this particular lifetime with that particular factor. Yeah. Shall we do the next slide?
Yes.
Sure.
That was a good point.
Yes.
Thank you. So, we were talking in the last session that we did with Taurus about the height at which things are found. Now, this can be quite literally, right? So things placed in Gemini can be found at a high level, because Gemini is an air Rashi. But you can also use it metaphorically, too. Let's give for instance, let's say if you've got, I was looking at somebody's chart the other day and was trying to understand something about the person's father. Just basically, both indicators of father were in Gemini. Oh. And the person's father was a very spiritual person, right? Sometimes even to his own demise. Like they had belonged to a church, and the church had not behaved in the best of manners, but this person still wanted to stay by the church. So his, kept it at a very high level. You had the father, and you also had the 10th cusp there. So wanted to keep it all at a very high level. It was very important in their life. So things literally and metaphorically that are placed in Gemini are going to be found at a high level. Yeah. So.
Like if we would talk about one thing, could it be that it could lay upon one cupboard?
I'm sorry, repeat. Can lay upon one.
So for instance, we are in search of a thing.
Right.
A thing. And we have put it somewhere, but we forgot where we have put it.
Misplaced.
Exactly. Finding
misplaced items.
Yeah. Mm. So, for example, if Gemini is involved, it could lay on a cupboard, on a high cupboard.
Yes.
So somewhere high, on the roof, or on the stashing place beneath the roof, or something.
Exactly. Yes.
All right.
Yes. So quite literally, if you're looking for lost objects, if you're doing, say, a Prashna chart in order to find something lost,
Yes.
you might want to
That's
look
what I
for
meant.
the high level.
True.
So
Super.
all of these factors, like direction and things along those lines, are really good things for knowing where things are found, right?
Yes.
Say, for instance, if you're doing a consultation with somebody for a job, if a planet, and they're wanting to know, where they should move or where they're going to be the most successful. If they've got success-producing planets in an air sign, as we'll see a little bit later, then places in the West. And the West is where they're going to be the most successful.
Oh.
Yeah. So, Rajasic energy. Before we get into Rajasic energy, I also wanted to say about Gemini and the processes that Gemini represents. Basically, in Gemini, the gunas are created because before there's no differentiation.
Yeah.
So with Gemini, that's where you have coming into being the concept of Rajasic and Tamasic and Sattvic. Now, that's not to say that, that Aries isn't a Rajasic planet, Rashi, or that Taurus isn't. But it's more just kind of using the symbolism of Gemini and saying that the gunas would come into being through the process that's related to Gemini. So what is Rajasic energy? It's very desire-oriented and active. So Rajasic energy in Gemini applies all of its desires to those things that it's most interested in, those things that it's pursuing. And it has desire to create change or to create a shift or to just make something in general. Yeah.
Desireful, yeah?
Exactly. So planets placed in Gemini are going to get influenced by Rajasic processes, and they're going to be influenced in a Vata type manner. So changeable, desire-oriented, changeable. So you begin to put all these factors together and you begin to really have an understanding of how
planets behave.
Versatile each particular Rashi is.
Yeah.
And that's really what all these different things are about. Is they're like sutras, really. A lot of this is taken from Bhrighu Shastra. So these are sutras that are easy to commit to memory about each particular Rashi, or when you're talking about grahas, each particular graha. And so then when you have these simple concepts in the back of your mind, and you encounter a particular factor, then you're able to just kind of immediately know what it's all about.
Relate.
Exactly. Yes. Caste. Now, I want to say there's a lot of texts that disagree upon the caste of the planets. So for this purpose, I've used the listings that are in Brihat Parashara or Shastra.
Yeah.
Right.
So basically, the caste of Gemini is Sudra. And a lot of people will say Vaishya, but Gemini is Sudra, and it's the Rajasic Sudra. So it wants to pursue the fulfillment of its desires. And so the Sudra caste can be considered in terms of the caste system, and this is not a criticism of any caste in any way, shape, or form.
Sure.
We're rising above the caste system, but it's more symbolism that speaks about specific things. So Sudras were more considered like the servant caste, or and so if you consider the servant caste, they're going to have desires for something greater. And with Gemini being Rajasic, it's going to have a desire to have its interests fulfilled immediately, or its desires fulfilled immediately. And in that ways, it's a Sudra, and it's a Rajasic.
Can we say in this connection also they are interested in really bringing this spark into matter, yeah?
Exactly. And so they're going to serve the particular interest that they're involved in, or their particular idea. And so they're going to be a servant to that. And equally, if we go back to what we were saying before, that's going to to explain why Gemini energy. I'm not wanting anybody to misinterpret it and think that we're just talking about Gemini ascendants or Gemini moons or any of these things. We're talking about any planet that is placed in Gemini.
Yes.
With that planet, the individual can just become so engrossed in what that particular planet is about that it's just going to serve the cause of that planet.
Ah.
Yeah.
Also good. Vice versa. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And if you have several planets there, then you're going to serve the purpose of several of those planets. I mean, that's not going to exclude the other planets. It just means that with those planets, you're going to be very desire-oriented, or with those house lords, you'll be very desire-oriented and engrossed in those particular concepts.
Mm.
Certainly, yeah.
So, but one more question concerning this I have. You mentioned it in the beginning. You say that the merchant, it's usually, or not usually, but as well considered as a merchant caste. Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
But you particularly take it as a Shudra or Brihat Parasha Horashastra. Take it.
Brihat Parashara Horashastra considers as a Sudra, but really I can see hints of both. I can see hints of both there. Yeah.
Hmm.
But but we also have to look at the fact that whereas if Gemini were purely Vaisha, then what's the word I want to use? I don't want to say self-serving, cause-serving side of it wouldn't be as prominent, because there would be more interchange involved. And we'll see later how it's, because when we were talking about, let's say for instance, we were talking about quadruped Rashis. When you get into the two-legged Rashis, quadruped Rashis tend to be more 10th house oriented, let's say that. So they're, going to really want to make something, high or lofty, so to speak. And many times they won't care quite as much about fourth house matters. Okay. Right? They're caring about the burden that they're carrying. Whereas, I'm giving a little bit of the next material.
Is that because they're stronger, they're more stable, more grounded, with a 4 feet? Or...
That's exactly, yeah. That's why the symbolism's there. But when you get into the two-legged Rashis, they're going to, so you could say that four-legged Rashis pay more attention to, I'm using symbolism, 10th house concepts than fourth house concepts. So they'll exclude fourth for the sake of 10th. When you get into the two-legged Rashis, as Gemini is one of those, they will focus on first house to the exclusion of seventh. Yeah.
Okay.
That's an interesting concept.
Very interesting. The merchant caste, I think we could consider it in the way of communication, because Gemini also is known as a very communicative sign, yeah? And there there we can really see the exchange. You would agree to that?
I completely agree, and I also will say that there are also some merchants who are very self-oriented.
Oh, definitely.
So it's maybe it's fair to say, even though that this is in Brihat Parashara Horashastra, you could really find elements of both in it.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we continue with the night.
Night. So there are night Rashis and day Rashis. So it's kind of hard to explain night Rashis, because you look at Aries and you'd go, Aries isn't so energized by their internal experiences, but they are, right? So I think internal needs to be explained. Internal doesn't always mean that the individual is reflective or purely intuitive, even though Aries is a very intuitive sign. It just means the more mind-oriented processes are going to be many times more prominent. So they're not as extroverted experience. It's more what's going on inside of them. So with Gemini, the logic and the attempt to understand something is another internal process. And that's a process of Gemini, is using logic to try to rationalize. So Gemini is energized by its thoughts, which in essence are very internal
Yes.
concept. Yes.
Nicely put, yes.
Because as we all know, let's use some science fiction spirituality, which isn't science fiction at all, but it's a line taken from some science fiction movie I saw. But I just thought it was a really great spiritual concept to put in a science fiction film, which was your perception creates your reality. Each of us has a different concept of what reality is about. So your thoughts, your structure, or your paradigm is not going to be the same as somebody else's. And when an individual gets to that point, because I think at some point in our life, we just think that everybody sees things in the same way that we do.
Yes.
The moment comes when we find out, no, they don't. And it's just, yes.
Seems terrifying in the beginning, no? But
yes, exactly. Exactly. I remember being a child and asking people, going, do you ever have those experiences where I can't, put a specific on it? Do you ever have this happen or that happen? And they would just go, no. And when I began to hear that over and over again, the first initial thought was, First initial thought was, what's wrong with me? Right?
Well, yes.
Because that happens at a young age, you begin to think that, So
Yes.
as I was saying, I have Jupiter in Gemini.
Yes, yes.
The concept of trying to understand things, and I was recognizing these are just my thoughts.
But children also, it starts like that because they close their eyes and then they think that nobody can see them.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
If a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, it doesn't make a noise.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I was, just to kind of share a brief analogy, I had another job at one point ages ago and was on the job, and there was a young lad there. He was probably like 16 or 17. He was very intellectually oriented. And he had obviously, picked up a line from Descartes, which is, I think, therefore I am. And somebody else who was in their 60s, who was also working there, turned to him and said, oh, yeah, well, what are you when you don't think?
Well.
And he didn't have an answer for that one.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
So
Good one, yeah.
Exactly. Gemini is energized by its thoughts.
Yes.
So Sarshdaya Rashi. This is the first Sarshdaya Rashi we've encountered. Sarshdaya Rashis rise with their head first. I've really been loving finding these pictures of the actual constellations because you can really see you've actually got the heads coming up. And that's what this is about. You've got these particular constellations, they'll rise with the head section first. And so, whereas the Prishtadaya Rashis are rising with their tail end first, well, if you're kind of coming, let's say you're coming out of a hole and you're sticking your rear up in the air, right? And you don't know if there's somebody riding their bicycle behind you.
Yes.
You're more likely to get hit by that bicycle. But if you are coming out of a hole and you're coming out of it with your head, then you're going to be able to see things. So with Sarshdaya Rashis, they're less likely to be caught off their guard. So whatever is placed in a Sarshdaya Rashi, there can, in a general sense, with other factors being equal, be the capacity to be more successful with the responsibility of whatever is placed in a Sarshdaya Rashi. And these particular factors become very important when you get into Prashna. Yeah, if you see, there's a Sarshdaya Rashi involved in terms of the answer, then there can be more of a capacity for success than if there were a Prishtadaya Rashi.
Yes.
All right.
Which is going to give less awareness to the situation.
Yes. And also this stands for a mind concept, yeah?
For the mind concept?
Yes, as we were talking in the past slides, that the origin of mind, or to grasp ideas, rising with the head first.
Oh, exactly.
That I
Rising with the
meant.
head first.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yes, exactly.
head prone, you say?
Exactly. And sometimes, and I think it's easy to misconstrue this too, and maybe I should go into an explanation of that as well. Notice I said other factors being the same, things
Yes.
will be successful. Right? Because we can be very head-oriented too. We can, let's say you come up out of a hole and you're seeing something. Well, you may not see everything. You may not hear certain things. And so you may see the first thing and form a concept based upon that first thing that you see. But that's not always appropriate. So there's a lot of other factors you have to take into consideration. But the more factors you have, the easier it is to make a judgment. Yeah. So let's say you've got, a planet with, good Shadbala, right? And it happens to be in the middle of a Rashi between 12 to 18 degrees. Well, in using what are called the Baladi avastas, if you have a planet that's in the middle of a Rashi, it's going to be Yuva, or fully aware. So Yuva planets would have more of a capacity to do that. Whereas, let's say, Bala planets, it may not be as successful in that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The avastas come into play.
Exactly. So much comes into play, but if you just learn all these different concepts and then you put it all together, and eventually it becomes like riding a bike where things will just pop into your mind and you'll get it. Yeah.
Yes.
Or you'll question and eventually you'll go get it. So we're talking about really Gemini-oriented things today, questioning and curiosity. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
When we involve with the thing, no, it develops, it comes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We have experienced this with the other Rashis too.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Yes.
So it is very interesting point.
Two-footed. So we were talking about two-footed before. So the four-footed Rashis are able to carry greater burdens. So two-footed Rashis don't have that, force or power to do that, but their strength is the capacity that they have to change or to adapt to the circumstances. As we were saying before, they're going to be very interested in first house concepts like cognizance or thoughts or ideas, or even sometimes themselves. So they're self-oriented. They're not as concerned with partnerships. So many times, this is another reason why Gemini energy can be considered to be very fickle, because many times with Gemini energy, let's say you've got the seventh Lord in Gemini, then that individual may have the capacity to get into relationships that serve them. And I don't want to be misinterpreted as saying that is selfish, because it's not. It's just part of destiny. It's part of that individual's
Absolutely, yeah.
To somebody else, it's going to be considered as being selfish. It's going to be considered as being two-faced. All those things will be there because we're all here with different energies interacting with each other. And so let's say somebody who, has their seventh Lord in Gemini. Well, let's say, for instance, if they got involved with somebody who fidelity is, exceptionally important to them. I'm not saying fidelity shouldn't be important to anybody, so I'm not making judgments there. I just want to say that.
No.
Yes,
so
sure.
Basically, they may find that there's a conflict that's there, because that other person, to them, what a relationship's all about is that the other person must be completely into them, and that's it. And so that other individual who might have their seventh Lord in Gemini, who's going to be flitting from interest to interest, it may not work, right? So Gemini is energized, as we said before, by its thoughts. So it's going to use the connections that it has, the relationships that it has, in order to serve its own purpose. And in that way, it's crura. So it's cruel in that manner.
Determined to do so.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. Should I continue?
Yes, please. Male. And so Gemini is the male Rashi of Mercury. And so male Rashis are about initiative and action. So Gemini is the initiative of the mind. It sparks things through its mind. It will develop thoughts about the things that it sees and attempt to structure its world accordingly. So it takes those resources that it has, and then it uses the male or masculine force in order to structure things or create things, right? But it's all based around its thoughts, its interests. And so it'll use the things that it's most interested in, or that it's most curious about, or the things that come into its field of being, and structure things according to that.
Also the things which he intuitively gets, we can say, right?
Exactly, yeah, because that's another capacity of the mind, yes.
Yeah, because Mercury itself is also one messenger. Yeah,
it is most
in
definitely.
Between the worlds of the gods and of humans, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So intuition might also be information, and to put this into structure.
Exactly. And let's say we had a retrograde Mercury placed in Gemini, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or a retrograde planet in general, or let's say Jupiter in Gemini, or a retrograde Jupiter in Gemini, then it's going to be using more of that intuitive side of it.
Oh.
And structuring its internal world based upon what it's intuiting, right? But it's still structuring its world, because that's one side of our world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, nice.
Yes.
Nice.
So this is what we have from Brihat Parashara Horus Shastra about Gemini. So we've said that it's front rising. So we know about that. And we're going to get into the symbolism about Gemini here in a moment. It's in Brihat Parashara Horus Shastra, it says it's symbolized by a pair of humans with a mace and with a lute. It's Western. So let's talk about the West and how that's going to interact with Gemini. So we're talking about things that one is interested in. Well, the West represents the natural seventh house of the zodiac. So it's the other. So one is going towards the other, whatever that other might be, a person, something that one's interested in, chocolate chip cookie, anything, right? That's the other. And so it's going to become very interested in that other from a self-oriented manner.
Into the external, we can say.
Exactly. Yes. Huh? Yes.
Very interested.
So that's the Western concept. But we also use this for interpreting things too. So let's say we were talking about if you're looking for something lost, it might be found in the West if it's placed in Gemini, or to the west of where you're looking from, right? Yeah. Airy, we were already looking at that. Two-footed, we've covered that concept. Night strong, village roaming. Because again, here's where you have that concept that's more connected with the Vaishya. So village roaming. What's going on in the village? There's activity. There's a lot of, hustle and bustle, right? Things going on, rather than, let's say, if one were in the country. It's going to be more, quiet. And there's not going to be quite as much of the interaction on one level. You can argue you're interacting with nature, which would be true, but we're talking about a lot of movement, a lot of things happening, a lot of things to be interested in. Okay? So we covered Vata, normal limbed. You're going to get with the Rashis, they'll be large in body, or medium limbed, or normal limbed is the same thing. And basically that relates to the amount of time that it takes that Rashi to rise. So it's not long, and it's not, short, it's normal M. So it's kind of medium related things. So things that can happen in relation to Gemini, they may have a medium type of duration, right? Because there's transition that's going on with Gemini. And grass colored. So green, so that's the basic concept, green. And green's a very active color. It's a very lush color. It's the color of life itself, so to speak. If we look at nature, we see green, unless you live in an environment where there's less green, right? You're seeing white all the time because you're in a snowy environment, right? But the main concept is that, grass is colored green. So, but nature itself, we've got the concept of differentiation.
Definitely.
Okay?
Yes.
And so that's, those are the qualities of Gemini. So if you can memorize this one phrase, you've got all the other things that we just spoke about.
Absolutely.
Plus a couple of other concepts.
That is the greatness of the classics.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I thank you very, very much, because you give a beautiful overview before, and then you reach to this shloka.
Exactly. It's not
the other way around. It is
exactly. Yes.
It is wonderful.
Yeah, because then you have all the stuff in your mind already, and then you've got the short thing to remember it.
Yes. But then it is a way of decoding for the audience also.
Exactly. Yes. Because we want it to be easy. We want astrology to be simple. I think one of the biggest hindrances, I know this is a bit off topic, but I think one of the biggest hindrances to people learning astrology is they get overwhelmed with details. And they become very frightened almost. They start going, well, I'm never going to be able to integrate all this.
And frustrated, yes.
Yeah, you're not going to integrate it in 6 months.
No.
It's not going to happen like that.
No.
But if you stick with it, you're going to have these little bits that come to you that you recognize all these really wonderful things that you can do with astrology, and your interest is just going to deepen. And then those things that didn't make sense before are going to begin to open themselves to you. Yeah.
Eventually, things drawn upon you.
Yeah.
If it's learned in a structured method.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, let's take Jaimini for instance, which Jaimini astrology, Jaimini sutras, there's so many different interpretations of it. Because it was written in such a coded manner on purpose. It was written that way on purpose. If you think about it, that's the perfect way to put a teaching that you might be concerned somebody might get a hold of and abuse, right? Because if it's coded, it's going to be harder for somebody to figure it out. But the sincere person is going to delve into it. And they're going to spend a lot of time with it. They're going to really work on learning it. And then they'll get the gift of what that's all about, because it will open itself to the individual. And that's the way astrology is in general, right? It opens itself to you at the pace of your own development. And that development is more than just your development as an astrologer. That development is also your development as a human being. And the development of your spirituality. And the more your spirituality develops, the more things make themselves apparent to you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
After all, I think this is one thought I get again and again. I think sometimes it is not so much the code. It is the simplicity which speaks. And as long as we are so complicated, we cannot grasp the simple things.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
As well as, yes.
They seem complicated to us, but they're simple.
They're simple.
Yes.
They're most simple. We are the ones who are thinking in
You are
complicated
Too complex,
way.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what Michael said was lovely, really. I mean, you put it in a shell, in a nutshell. If you dedicate it enough, and if you have the sincerity and the devotion to actually sit down and do the work, that's when the real value of the science comes.
Exactly, over time, and it's
Over time.
It's not something that's immediate, right? But it starts happening quicker than you can imagine if you're open to it.
Yes.
So I think some of the best things for budding astrologers too is when you get into that space where you're confused and it's becoming difficult. Try to temporarily, because it's important to be analytical and intuitive side by side, but try to step away from the potential of being overly analytical about it. Because that moment you can do that, that's when something will likely speak to you. Yes.
The moment we let go, no? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So shall we do the next slide?
Okay.
The symbolism, right. Now this is, it's really simple symbolism. We've got two vertical lines, so that's the two opposites. And equally, you've got a receptive curve at the top, right? And an active curve at the bottom. And those curves are uniting the two opposites. So the two vertical lines are being united by the two horizontal lines. So this is the dualism of Gemini in a nutshell. And it's really profound. It's both passive and active. Both masculine and feminine. It's both movable and fixed. It's all of these things. It's all of the opposites engrossed in one.
Living side by side, yeah?
Exactly, exactly. And I have one more slide with symbolism too that's very helpful for this. And it's going back to the picture of the constellation. So you see two twins, right? In some instances it's shown as masculine and feminine, but you can see that one of them has their arm around the other one. Equally, one of them's holding a mace and the other one's holding a lute. So one thing that this says too is with the concept of intelligence that's bestowed upon the individual consciousness comes the capacity to use that mind to either create or to destroy. Your mind can turn in on you and create more problems than it does help. Or if it's used appropriately, it can be very creative and help to provide the solutions to your problem. So all within this one symbol, we have that entire concept.
Great.
That which creates can also destroy. And sometimes destruction is very necessary to the creative process too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Possible. Very much possible. Oh, we come to one chart.
We've got Krishnamurti's chart. And I chose this chart. There's a lot here. I'm going to have to avoid my temptation of getting into the Nakshatras that are there. But there's just a lot that's there. And mainly, the reason I wanted to touch on this is if you look, we've got Venus as the ruler of the ninth in this chart. If we're looking at house cusps, okay? I'm using house cusps in this particular instance. So where you see these blue numbers in either the northern or the southern Indian chart, that's the house cusp. So these are special defined.
But on this you have to explain, please, one more time, because not everybody is used to this particular software of Kala.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the blue number here in the ninth house in the North Indian chart, there is written 8.
Right.
Is it true?
Can we move our heads over? Because our heads are covering the North Indian chart for me.
Ah, okay. With us is on the other side.
Can you move it just briefly to the other side for just a second so I can see how it's written down on it?
Tell me if it is correct. Can you see?
I cannot. What you should have, oh, I see what you're saying. In the 9th house, you've got the number 8, right?
Yes.
What I'm actually looking at is where you would see Libra, right?
Libra.
So Libra. These golden numbers are the
It's the
signs.
10th house. Yes.
So when you see 7 over here to the right, then that's Libra.
Yeah.
So you should see the number 9 there. That's
yes.
the particular house cusp that we're talking about.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So the 9th house cusp is actually in Gemini. The 9th lord is in Gemini, and that's actually Venus in this particular case. And so we can see that would be one's beliefs or one's thoughts, right? So Krishnamurti would have had very adaptable thoughts. I'm not going to explain fully how I see this. Maybe I'll go into it briefly. We can see also we've got Venus in Mrigashira Nakshatra, right? So that brings the potential to be dissatisfied with one's beliefs, so always striving for something greater. And equally, we can see, if you play around with the Avastas a little bit, you'll see a weak Jupiter ruling Punarvasu, right? So really feeling like it's never quite there. It's never quite in fullness being shown. So always seeking higher and higher. If we go to the next slide, which is actually a phrase by Krishnamurti, then we can see where a lot of this would have come from. So again, I'm going to have a hard time seeing some of it because our heads are covering it over.
How it's possible?
So I can read some of it, and maybe you can help me if I miss some words here. If
yes.
we had no belief, what would happen to us? So here we have a very open belief system, which is both fixed and equally movable. If we had no belief, what would happen to us? Should we be very frightened of what might happen? If we had no pattern of action based on a belief, either in God or in communism or in socialism or in imperialism or in some kind of religious formula, some dogma in which we are conditioned, we should feel utterly lost, shouldn't we? It is not this acceptance of a belief, the covering up of the fear of being really nothing, of being empty. After all, a cup is only useful when it is...
empty.
Can anybody see that word? Empty. Good, thank you. Yes. And you might have to take over some. A young mind that is filled with beliefs, with dogmas, with assertions, with quotations, is really an uncreative mind. It is...
merely a repetitive mind.
Right. To escape from that fear of emptiness, that fear of loneliness, that fear of stagnation, of...
not arriving, not succeeding, not achieving.
Not achieving, not being something. Would you continue to read it? That might actually be better. Yeah? Okay.
Not achieving and not being something, not becoming something is surely one of the reasons. Is it not why we accept beliefs so eagerly and greedily? So it means that we need, in order to understand the life and ourselves, we think we have to believe in something. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. But if we can go back a slide,
yes,
we'll see that so Venus in terms of the royal court of planets is the minister in worldly affairs. So here we have minister of worldly affairs in Gemini, right? And you've got Jupiter, which is a karaka for the minister in spiritual affairs. And so all of those are placed in Gemini. have been a mind that would have gone this way and that way and the other way until finally they saw that it was neither this way nor that way. And that truth isn't that belief. Truth isn't that thought structure. There's something that's beyond that. But he would have had a personal experience of that. He had a personal experience that created that particular way of seeing things. It wasn't through just, learning it or, seeing it written somewhere. He had the personal experience of it. So this is what a force placed in Gemini would do. We have the planet that's responsible for the belief systems or responsible for purpose. Well, that is having something that's constantly adapting. As it's receiving new information, it's receiving new input, it's growing what it knows until finally it reaches that particular point where it recognizes that there's something that's beyond all of these things, all of these concepts. There's something that's beyond belief itself.
Yes. Plus we have Moon here in the 12th house, yeah?
Yes.
Exactly. Which is a sort of a reflective capacity.
Exactly.
But it is also involved, the thinking, yeah?
Yes.
The mind.
Yes. Exactly.
And
exactly.
then exchange.
And that's a moon.
Here
and that's
also.
a moon. I was going to say, and that's a moon in Mula. Yes.
Yeah. Plus an exchange of Venus, Mercury. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. You've got an interchange of Venus and Mercury. And that Mercury is in Kritika. So if we're taking the resources of Taurus, right, and we're doing something with it, what better of a position to do that with?
True.
Yeah.
Right.
So why don't we go to the slide after the next one. Yeah.
That one?
There we go. This is Nikola Tesla's chart.
Oh.
For those people who don't know about Tesla, Tesla was an inventor. He came up with something called the Tesla coil, which was never really utilized because it couldn't be sold. In other words, it was a way of bringing electricity into people's homes without, it was giving everybody free access to electricity, so to speak.
Exactly.
So right. But the reason I wanted to use this particular chart is we've got the 7th Lord, which is Venus. And that 7th Lord is actually in Gemini. Now, if you remember, we were saying about
7th Lord.
Planets in Gemini, they're going to tend to, or factors that are in Gemini, they're going to tend to be more self-oriented. Relationships are not really going to interest them that much. Okay, so we also have Saturn here, and it's something that wasn't perhaps well known about Tesla. Some people probably know it, was that he was celibate. We also have the 10th Lord. We've got Jupiter in Pisces, don't we? What is his Atmakaraka? Let's see. That his Atmakaraka is Mars.
Yes.
Okay, but we've got the 7th Lord there. I thought we might have had the 10th Lord, but we don't have the 10th Lord. We've got the 7th Lord placed in Gemini. So, so basically, he.
But we have the 10th Lord there in Gemini.
The
Shani.
10th Lord. Oh, you do. That's right. You have the 10th Lord.
Shani is the 10th Lord, yes.
And I will stress to people, if they ever get involved in working with house cusps, you do want to think both. You want to think equal house, and you want to think house cusps at the same time.
Okay.
You want to do
that's
both.
Why you.
So thank you for bringing it up, because yes, Capricorn is an actual 10th house. You have the 10th Lord there too, and I thought that I saw that there. So with the 10th Lord, he was just going to be so engrossed in his concepts, so engrossed in his scientific ideas, right? That's all he wanted to pay attention to. And so he didn't have any interest in relationships. None of that was there for him.
That is such a wonderful example.
Yes, with all these planets in the third house, a lot of self-will.
Exactly. Yes. And they're all in the third house. Yes.
Third house,
he was mad about it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah? Yes. Completely. And that's all he wanted to devote his time and energy and attention to.
And he did it. Yeah. Up to the level he was absolutely ruined. He was bankrupt. Everything. Up to he was crazy about it.
And so here you have that second lord, which is also Venus. That second lord is also. And Venus is also ruler of both of the Maraka cusps. You see?
Yes.
And so, so it would have been potentially ruinous to him. But on one level, he wouldn't have cared. He just wanted to,
He didn't care.
He didn't care. He just did what he did.
Yes.
I think this should be this last slide that we do, because the other one's really just kind of a similar example. But this one, I think, really says it more than the other one did. So I think that
this says it all in my eyes.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Because the concept which you explained to us today of Gemini and then Tesla, he was really engrossed in his ideas. And he fetched it. He fetched it from above, we can say.
Exactly. And I was going to bring up that things being found in high places. He put that, that was in a high place. His ideas, which, if you look at the first house as being cognizance, I often find the second house has a lot of connotations with ideas, because it's the ownership of the mind, right? It's what the individual owns through their mind. So equally, you have the second, yes. So those ideas were in a very high place. His work, his technical work was in a really high place, right? His aspirations in a really high place. All of it, so.
He worked with radio waves. One has to say also, for the people who don't know Tesla, must be Googler upon him, yeah? Exactly.
You could read for hours on him.
He was amazing. A masterpiece.
Exactly.
Yeah, and he could have easily sold all of his concepts and become a rich man. Yeah?
I think if I remember correctly, he died poor.
Excuse me?
I think if I remember correctly, he died poor.
Very poor.
Yeah.
And
living
sick.
In a hotel, I think is what happened. Yes. Yeah.
No?
Yes.
So, we come to an end with the slide share?
I think so. Yeah, this should be the last slide that we do. Yeah, there we go.
That was such a wonderful explanation of Gemini today.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael.
That was wonderful.
So, Michael, that was a wonderful session. We thank you by heart for bringing the samples closer to us. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Again and again and again, we will have you on.
Yes, it's such it's wonderful to listen to you.
Oh, thank you.
You have ways of connecting the Rashis and bringing them down on Earth. It's lovely.
That was really a good point. Good point. And soon we're going to talk upon Cancer.
Soon, yes,
Rashi.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would really like to ask the people to post their comments and questions and everything below the video on YouTube or even on the forums on Facebook. So it will be a very wonderful interaction for all of us.
Most definitely.
Learn.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
So
yes,
namaste for today.
Thank you. Thank you.
And hope to see you soon.
Thank you. And take care, everyone.
Yes.
Bye now.
Bye.